permit for improvements by Little League to the existing Holbrook Palmer Park, the baseball field.
Thank you. Menlo Atherton Little League has been utilizing the baseball field at Holbrook Palmer Park since 2000, and at that time they had constructed the baseball field after approval from the City Council of a mitigated negative declaration and a license agreement. And that license agreement is what outlines the use of the field and the maintenance responsibilities and the payment of a fee to the town. That license agreement has been routinely extended by the City Council. Menlo Atherton Little League began discussions with the city for a new kind of replacement of the fencing and construction of new spectator seating, and that happened in early 2011. That included meetings with the Parks and Recreation Commission as well as meetings before the Planning Commission. The City Council, as you're aware, decided to put the item out for a ballot measure, and that was supported by the voters in November of last year with a support of 75.1% of the voters. I do have the exact ballot measure wording. I think I've quoted it in the staff report as well as a copy of the election results. We can hand that out. When we came back to the City Council after the election outcome, the City Council asked for a public input process. And that was outlined in a memo to the City Council from staff that it go before the Planning Commission following a conditional use permit process. That's been further reviewed by the City Attorney, and we feel it's more appropriate this time rather than to issue a conditional use permit from the Planning Commission, rather to have the Planning Commission recommend conditions that would be included in that field use agreement that would be authorized by the City Council. So we're amending this slightly from what you have before you. Rather than a use permit, having you recommend conditions that the City Council would then apply to the field use agreement. And the City Attorney and I can expand on that a bit if you'd like. I'll just go through the proposal quickly. You do have it before you. The item was reviewed by the Parks and Recreation Commission at a special meeting, and they've included a list of comments that have been added to your staff report. We did do a nice little site walk. We measured out where the foul poles would be and had some stored poles to visualize it, so I think that was helpful. But the item before you is a request from Little League to build new covered seating for spectators. They're estimating that that would accommodate 100 people. And I want to clarify, the plans say 200 persons. And the reason it says 200 is when you look at the building code and you make a determination of what the occupancy, it's based on 18-inch width per person per seat, because it's bench style seating, it's not individual seats. So the building code assigns 18 inches per person. And I don't have a tape measure, but that's pretty tight. So Menlo Atherton Little League feels that 36 inches is a more comfortable seating arrangement for this area, and they've indicated that this would accommodate 100 persons comfortably. It would certainly be signed maximum persons if that's what the Council, the Planning Commission is recommending. The main reason for the building code assigned is to make sure there's adequate exit and egress for that number of people, and it's a fire code safety issue as well. So we're looking at it as accommodating comfortably 100 persons, and Menlo Atherton Little League can talk about that a little bit, also their experience as to how many people typically attend a game. The structure itself is proposed at 15 feet tall. Within the center would be a 2-foot tall decorative cupola, so the very topmost point of the structure is proposed at 17 feet. The seating is proposed as aluminum bleacher seating, and it's proposed with horizontal wood siding on the structure to match other buildings on site with some decorative lattice and handrails. So a little over 1,100 square feet for the spectator seating. Directly behind that, they're proposing to construct new restrooms and storage rooms. That building is the same materials and colors as the seating structure, with a sidewall height of 6 foot 8 inches. And the restroom storage building is approximately 1,000 square feet in area. So combined, the total building area is a little over 2,000 square feet. They also propose to do some spot repairs to the existing field, replace the backstop. The backstop right now would be similar style, the black open mesh link fence, and it would be hooded, so it would come out over the home plate. to decrease the foul balls to a maximum height of 20 feet. They also proposed to construct 2 new covered dugouts with bench seating for the players. And that's just a simple hip roof with 4 posts. It's not fully enclosed. And the height of that roof line is 9 feet proposed. The fencing would be extended from the backstop all the way to the foul poles, and they're proposing to install new foul poles. They're proposing the fencing be at a height of approximately 4 feet. And when a staff member took a look at that, they were a little concerned about the height with the kids hitting it, and staff was thinking it maybe needed to be taller in height. But Menlo's proposal would be 4 foot in height. And that would, as I said, extend from the dugout through the warm-up areas all the way to the foul pole fence. Removable outfield fence, and that would be removed. The conditions would be specified in that field use agreement, but they would agree to remove it at the end of the season as well as at the request of the town for special events. 2 new 15-foot tall foul poles at right and left field corners, and a new electronic scoreboard. So the scoreboard itself is proposed as 3 feet tall by 8 feet wide, and it would be on top of a 10-foot pole, so you would have 10-foot clearance underneath it. So the total height of that scoreboard would be 13 feet above grade. And that is recommended to be in the left field, right next to that foul pole. So you would see it as you were driving down Watkins, you would see the back of the pole.
That's recommended, or that's proposed?
That's proposed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Proposed by Menlo Atherton Little League. When the Park and Recreation Commission conducted their site walk, they thought it would be more appropriate to be in the right field, thought it would blend better with the site, with the trees behind it would be less visible as opposed to the left field. And I'll let Menlo Atherton Little League to respond to that. But that was a request of recommendation of Parks and Rec Commission that it be moved to right field. They're proposed to remove some smaller trees on site. No heritage trees are proposed to be removed. And staff is requesting that any trees that be removed be relocated on site. And Kevin Kilty has taken a look at those trees and talk about if that's feasible. And then they're proposing to plant 8 new trees. That would be magnolia, crabapple tree, pin oak, and 2 box-sized live oak trees. The proposal does comply with the town's setback requirements for the front and rear property line. And as I indicated, the field use hours would be the same as in the current field use agreement, so there's no extension of time, no extension of the season. And I think that's about all for the review. Bill, do you want to talk a little bit about the requirement for the conditions and if there's anything you want to expand on?
May I ask first that you clarify for me, something seems to have been left out on top of the Little League letter on page 2.
You're missing a page.
Missing that?
Well, I agree with you.
Oh,
There's
you're
some-
missing a page.
Just,
Yeah.
Shoot.
Always good to have an attorney. Yeah, something's missing at any rate. And then in regard to the letter by the Park Commission, by Mr. Timpson, there's something that doesn't make sense. On the top of page 2, where we talk about the field, it says field most agreed with keeping the limits to 200 feet, where the original conceptual drawings of 21 feet would keep the grading to a minimum. That doesn't make sense.
I think it was a typo.
It's a typo
But
again.
I'm not sure what it was originally supposed to be.
In other words, it was something different than 200 feet.
It was bigger, I believe.
No,
No,
always been 200 feet, that's Little League standard.
I'm sorry. Where's the question relating?
The question is relating to the letter by
page 2.
Mary Lou
Oh,
Timpson.
the Parks and Rec.
It's the top of page 2, and under the subheading field. Minor point, but there's something left out. The number.
So I'm not even sure where she came up with that.
So you,
He didn't open it yet, so if you want to just
Oh,
hang
sorry.
on. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem.
I think previously it was talked about 210 feet, and that would interfere with the path, walking path, and there was a little grading where it dipped down, kind of in the right field area.
Right. And there's also,
And you know, what Parks and Rec Commission had seen previously were conceptual plans, so I'm not sure these dimensions were accurate, but I think that the earlier discussions were 210 feet, and there was a little fill and grading that was needed to occur. So that was what that was in response to.
okay, so basically, all right. So basically, so the, today, we're talking about 200 feet.
Correct.
Okay. And you asked the town attorney to give us a dissertation on what's being asked of us. I would want to know now, and the limitations, or what can we do in regard to the proposal itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This is clearly confusing. And it just is, the city council, when they kicked it back to the planning commission, they struggled to find a way to do that. And ultimately, staff came up with this concept of, quote, a CUP, a conditional use permit. Unfortunately, CUPs run with the land and have all kinds of other procedural hangups that run with them. This is not, and quite frankly, interestingly enough, as Lisa pointed out to me today, this is a principally permitted use in the park. It allows for recreational uses. So it's not a use issue. The question is, the voters have approved something. And I'll talk a little bit about what they've approved, and then within that framework, they establish boundaries within which you still have parameters of review and discretion. So let's not worry about the name, let's worry about the product. And the product should be a recommendation to the city council, ultimately, saying to them, we've looked at this, and here's what we would recommend that you consider as a package of conditions that ought to be applied to this approval. And I think in that framework, it's a lot easier to wrap yourself around this. So, what did the voters really do to you? Well, they took away a lot of your discretion in certain areas, and in other areas they did nothing. If you note, it wasn't just the ballot measure itself. The ballot measure itself was written very generally. And quite frankly, I wrote it, and I wrote it intentionally to be very general and broad to give the town the most flexibility. Then, as of course luck would have it, there are arguments for and against, and an impartial analysis that's drafted by the city attorney. The impartial analysis does talk a little bit about the proposal that was presented originally that said they wanted to level the field, erect temporary removable fences, construct a scoreboard, permanent foul lines, and covered seating grandstands. Again, no numbers. So leaving flexibility. Now, some of your neighbors have perhaps created some artificial limits, because the argument against Measure M says it's a stadium with 200 covered seats. And it goes on to explain why that's a huge problem, and you know the issues that related to 200 seats. Then it talks about a 210-foot, so I believe it was originally 210-foot perimeter fence, cyclone fence, lighted scoreboard, and all these problems that could arise from that. In view of those arguments, 75% of the voters rejected those arguments. So I'm not saying you have to agree with that those are the parameters, but I would say that's the uppermost reach. For instance, you don't have to agree to more than 200 seats, but 200 seats would be the maximum that have been reviewed by the voters. Could be argued that the voters said 200 seats was okay. I don't draw that exact conclusion from it. I think it's more of a height, mass, bulk kind of a question, and not so much about the number of seats. It does talk about the fence, it does talk about scoreboards, it does talk about covered grandstands, as do some of these other issues. I think that what we're looking for here is the use is already established for you. It's okay to have covered stands and a Little League field. That use has been approved by the voters, and so saying no is not an option. Nor is, I'm going to call it a tacit denial. You cannot just come and say, well, okay, you can have, the voters said covered seats, you can have 11. I mean, somewhere in the level of rationality and reasonableness, there has to be some balance. And the reason I point out the argument against the measure is because the argument itself used 200 seats without giving a dimension, but 200 seats, and the voters rejected that argument, apparently, pretty resoundingly. You can't say they agreed that 200 was okay, but you can say that they voted to approve it with that limit set forth. I think a better way to look at this is traditional zoning standards. As staff has told you, this falls within the heights and other limits that would be allowable in the what is it, SO zone, SP zone, whatever it is. And Parks Open Space Zone, yeah. And so the question then becomes one of, in terms of density, mass, is there a problem with the way it's oriented, those kinds of things. But I would stay away from the things that arguably the voters looked at pretty heavily. But I still think that, and it did issue a memo a few months back, and it does say, I think quite correctly, that you are allowed to look at the size, the shape, the color, the kind of the way it's situated on the property, those kinds of things. Those are within your parameters. The voters didn't take those away. But again, you've been handed an odd hand, and I appreciate that. I can't give you a blind test. I can't say where the black and white is, because there isn't any. All I can say is that I think you now have a proposal in front of you, and I just look at the proposal and quite frankly say, I like this, I don't like that. And see if you can come up with a consensus among the commissioners and forward that on to the city council for their review.
One question about the procedure based on something that Lisa said. I mean, when we were here the last time, that's sort of where we were moving towards. Here's the proposal that's in front of us, up, down, sideways, on whatever. What you also said in your staff report was about the actual lease and recommendations on the lease. I mean, I was not thinking coming in here that we would be having any opinion on, you know, what should the maintenance agreement look like?
No.
What should the hours of
What the city council said at the January city council meeting was that staff will incorporate all the plans following the approval by the planning commission and building department, which really is the recommendations from those departments, into the facility use agreement amendment, along with other issues including responsibilities during construction, operations, maintenance, repair, fees, and terms. Those are the other things that are down the road.
Okay, so it's still basically what it says in here, not coming up with
Correct.
positions on things that aren't dealt with here, like how much, who's maintaining it, what period of time, is it locked in the off season, is it you know, open in the off season, things like that. That would be for
Correct.
city council staff,
Exactly.
others.
Okay.
A further question along that line. In order to make a good decision, don't we have to know some of the things, for example, they're talking about a covered grandstand with siding and maintenance. Don't we have to know how that's plans to maintain that thing? Furthermore, it says the building shall be the property of Atherton. If all else fails, does it fall back to the town to do the maintenance in any case?
I would suggest those are really city council decisions. Your land use, you look at things and say, I mean, you look at, somebody comes in front of you with a new house, you don't say, how are you gonna maintain that? The school comes to you tonight and they say, you know, we've got a traffic problem, but you don't say, how are you gonna maintain the pavement inside your facility? Those are really owner issues. And I think the owner of this property is the city council. Now, those are good issues for the city council to think about, and you might want to pass on to them a laundry list if you have things that they should look at. But that's not a land use issue. Maintenance is not something that normally falls into that category.
But we can discuss those issues in order to make that list.
Well, you'd have to, I guess, talk about, these are things they should look at, but I wouldn't say that you should wrap yourself around an issue and see how much time and how much staff time you can apply towards coming up with answers. I mean, bottom line is, if the town is going to accept it, then the town is going to accept maintenance of the facility as well. The town may look to Little League and say, we will accept it, and we will maintain this aspect of it, and if you maintain these other aspects of it. That's pretty common. But it's a good point. It's just one where I don't think staff is going to be able to sit here and, we haven't looked at it, and we're not going to look at it until September or so when this goes back to the city council as to those kinds of issues.
Is there any case history on arguments in a ballot measure being used to guide the voter?
Yeah, actually.
Guide the governmental body.
There are cases, and they go both ways. If you think,
You can find a case that says anything.
yeah, you can pretty much find. But if you think about it, there's different stages of the ballot procedure, and the courts seem to like it if you're going to challenge something, if you challenge it pre-election, because then they have an opportunity to change the ballot language. I actually looked up some cases today, and there's cases that say, essentially, once the argument goes out to the voters, you can't really say exactly what the voters were thinking. But I will tell you this, if somebody says, this is gonna be too big, too ugly, too bad, and whatever, and then 75% of the people still vote for it, that ought to be telling you something. Now, it doesn't say that, what it says is these arguments didn't dissuade them from agreeing with the other facets of the ballot proposal. We intentionally didn't put in the number of seats, the number of fences, every single issue, because that then takes away any discretionary review by the town. And quite frankly, I think that the city council probably would appreciate hearing from the planning commission as to what you think about this proposal, that's in front of us here. Here it is, and what do you think?
That's my comment, and I hate to interrupt, but my suggestion is that we, and I obviously don't have anywhere near as much passion through this process as those who have been on the board for a long time, but I'm just gonna listen to the applicant and talk about it here and make good planning decisions, and within the boundaries that we get the legal advice after that. But I want to hear the applicant. I want to hear what they have to say. I want to hear the proposal. I have questions about the proposal, so I would recommend that we just do a normal planning process and take it to the next step. And then to the degree that gets limited by other factors, we factor that in after the fact.
But when you make your suggestions for change to the proposal, we should know what the voters want.
Well,
and that's why.
I get that, but my recommendation would be that the applicant didn't talk to every one of the voters, and I'm one of that 75%. So what I'm interested in hearing from the applicant as a normal applicant is what was proposed, what are the thinking behind it?
Well, that's fine, but I think
we just don't know what the voters thought, and quite frankly, in looking at this, you can make arguments all over the place. All I wanted to present to you were some of the informational facts that were in front of the voters when they made their decision.
Sure.
It did not limit, it did not say exactly what was going to be there, but there's a laundry list of things in the impartial analysis. There's a laundry list of things that were argued were problems in the the arguments against it. And actually, there's some laundry list of things in the proponents' arguments as well. And I think that all we have are those arguments, and again, because it's not exactly a conditional use permit that we then have to make the traditional CUP findings and things. Really, it's about, I think Commissioner Lane hit the nail on the head in the sense, weigh the proposal against the land use standards across the board, and then tell the applicants what you think about it, and tell the city council the same thing. Like it, don't like this part, don't like that part.
All right, well, that's fine.
And just like
I think each one of us will interpret in a different way as to what limitations
And you may.
have been placed on it, but as Eric said, we go through the proposal, you know, and
Sure.
ask questions and
Right.
so forth.
We don't have any great answers to,
Yeah,
to the
it's
system.
an unusual situation.
Very.
So, are there any further questions of the city attorney? Or?
I have a quick question of staff. There are a couple things on the plan that I didn't see specified, and one of them is that when I did the walkthrough and did the walk off, there are a couple things that are in the on the left field foul line that are the meters for utilities that are right on the foul line that were within the 200 feet. And I didn't see anything in the plan about movement of those or anything like that. Is that something we would work on later?
I don't believe they intend to relocate those, but I can have Little League respond to that.
All right, good, because it's right where an outfielder would go for a foul ball. All right,
Ow.
Right.
all right, and where the fence would go over it.
So,
All right.
okay, are there any further questions of staff? Let's move on then to the public hearing. Does somebody first want to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Gardner, and I'm here on behalf of Menlo Atherton Little League, along with a very talented team of professionals who have been working hard to ensure that the will of the voters is expressed overwhelmingly with their support for Measure M last November is actually realized. This is an important project. We are charged with the responsibility to provide a safe, comfortable, and attractive platform for our youth and families to flourish. These renovations will provide the children and families of our community a beautiful, civilized baseball field and surrounding area where they can gather, get to know each other, and celebrate the values that youth sports have to offer. The community deserves this, and thanks to generous volunteers and donors, it is being offered at no cost to taxpayers. Still, it has been a long road to get here. We've appeared before this commission on this subject more than once, the last being in June 2012. But this time is different. The purpose of our presentation is not to convince the commission that renovating the field and surrounding areas at Holbrook Palmer Park is the right thing to do. Clearly, the vast majority of Athertonians believe that it is. Nor is it our intent in this session to persuade you that the carefully thought out plan is right for the park and the community. We respect and appreciate the commission's role in this process and your understanding that the citizens of Atherton have already endorsed the plan and all plans were available for public viewing and comment long before the November 6th election. On the day, the citizens, again, overwhelmingly decided to accept this generous gift. Rather, our purpose tonight is to present once more the details of planned improvements to Holbrook Palmer Park, such as that the commission may address any concerns within its purview which need to be resolved. More specifically, we understand that the commission is responsible for weighing the plans submitted in light of state and local regulations and hope that our discussion tonight stays within the appropriate boundaries. We believe there are no issues with the plans relative to regulations and respectfully request the commission's recommendation to the council that the project be permitted to move forward post haste. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Carl Hess, the architectural visionary on this project, as well as a talented and experienced landscape architect, Mark Schlichter. After Carl and Mark give their presentations, we would be happy to answer any questions the commission may have, and we do thank you very much for your time and hearing our proposal tonight.
Okay. Mike, before you leave there, would you do me a favor, pull that shade down?
Absolutely, absolutely.
get it.
What you get for buying the cheap seats?
Thanks. Now I can see what's going on.
Okay, the commissioners will withhold their questions until all the speakers for the applicant give their presentation. And I ask you to, any questions that you might have rather than individual speakers.
I'm sorry, I failed to mention also, we do have a Park and Rec Commissioner available if you have any questions about their review and comments. And I do want to note that we did do a public notice 500-foot radius. I also sent it to the field users, AYS and office.
You didn't get it?
Wow.
Your target.
Good evening, my name is Carl Hess from Square 3 Design Studios, and we are the architects that have been working with Menlo Atherton Little League on the design of the new field improvements. I'm going to talk mostly about the architectural portion of the project, and as Mike Gardner mentioned, Mark Slichter, landscape architect from Callender Associates, will speak about the proposed landscaping improvements. Lisa covered a lot of what I was going to say, and I'll repeat some of it, and I'll try to keep my comments to a minimum, but I'm happy to answer any questions. As has been stated, the intent is to renovate or rebuild the existing field that's there. We feel it's very well situated in the park. It's adjacent to the tennis courts. It backs up to the train tracks, and a lot of fairly heavy tree vegetation along that left field foul line. And the reason for the project, as when I was approached, is for safety and a more comfortable baseball environment. The existing field, I understand you guys have walked the site, is not in very good shape, and certainly not a safe field for playing. As part of the new project, it would have a new backstop that's hooded, protect from foul balls, covered dugouts for the same reason, and I'm going to step away here for a second, but yeah, our intent was that the taller fence would continue past the dugouts to a point that also protects the bullpen area. And then it could drop down. But we did want the fencing, the permanent fencing, to continue out to the foul poles for protection of anybody walking along either of those foul lines. The covered seating area, we haven't really referred to it as grandstand. We don't feel it's grand. It's simply 5 tiers of seating, fairly low profile. The structure itself falls within the height limits of a accessory structure that would be allowed to be built on any residential property here in Atherton. The one little cupola detail on the top of the roof exceeds that 15-foot height limit, and the intent of that, while somewhat decorative, it was also to provide an escape for warm air. Material-wise, the bleacher seats are intended to be a pre-manufactured aluminum bench seat. The floor structure is tiered concrete, so it would last forever, be plenty durable. The structure is hopefully mostly wood framed. There may be some steel framing to reach some of the spans. Of course, we're trying to keep that as open as we can. Roofing is likely a asphalt comp roof, and the siding is a horizontal lap siding, painted. And the intent is to pick up on the colors in both the body color and the trim color of the existing buildings on the property. And then there's the decorative lattice, again, to pick up on some of the same flavor of the existing buildings on the property. The dugouts, covered dugouts, have a very low profile roof, again, for protection and sun protection as well. Our feeling was that all in all, it's a fairly vertically transparent structure. Of course, all the fences are open mesh. The covered seating is a very open structure. The back part does have a solid wall, and it's really all one structure. The back of the restroom storage buildings abut the back of the covered seating, and in that building there's, as Lisa mentioned, there's restrooms, both men's and women's, and storage for field maintenance equipment, baseball equipment, etc. Let's see. It's already been discussed that the outfield fence is to be removable. The foul poles are intended to be permanent. We did propose that the scoreboard be mounted along the left field line, and I know there's been some conversation